everybody, it's Olive again, here to talk to you about what I read in March 2015 and what I'm going to be reading for April 2015. Sorry this one's a little bit late. I've been caught up with tons of craziness in my life, but I am absolutely thrilled to be making this video and tell you guys what I've been reading. I had a pretty decent reading month in March. I took a rather long trip in the middle of March, during which I decided I wasn't going to do anything but just hang out with my family and go out and do fun things, so I didn't get much reading done then. And then my husband and I just got back from another weekend away, celebrating our 8th year anniversary together, so didn't get much reading done then either. But I have been focusing on some other activities. I've been catching up on some shows. I've been getting out there and doing things, which is always really good. And I've also taken up knitting once again, working on a tiny little project for a friend of mine. But the bottom line is I did get some reading done, but not all the reading I wanted to do. So I'm gonna try to make this quick, but I wanna tell you about the books that I managed to read in March and then quickly tell you about my goals for April. The first book I completed in March was Beljar by Meg Wolitzer. I listened to this one on audiobook. The Goodreads reviews for this one were really mixed. And going through the book, I didn't really understand. I really enjoyed it, and it was particularly interesting to listen to it on audiobook. When I got to the end, I could understand why some people would have some mixed feelings about it. It does take a little bit of a turn. I'm not going to say any more than that in case you're interested in reading and or listening to it. But I could see how some people would have some not so great feelings about that. I personally really enjoyed it. Gave it 4 stars. The next book I finished really quickly on ebook. I had pre-ordered it and just started gobbling it up immediately when it arrived on my Nook. And this was The Winter's Crime by Marie Rutkowski. I think I mentioned in my March TBR that I had won The Winter's Curse, which is the first book in this trilogy, off of a Book Riot giveaway. I read it because I was interested in the premise and I liked it. I gave it 3 stars. I found it enjoyable. It didn't blow me away. It didn't make me want to start reading more YA, which I kind of hoped it would. But I was interested enough in where the story was going to pre-order the second one. And oh my gosh, am I glad I did. It was such a good time. I loved the political elements of it, of course. That's more of my scene, but I loved the fact that it was just such a different kind of relationship between the 2 main characters than it was in the first book. There are now secrets between them. There are now big political figures who stand in the way of them having the relationship that they think they want. There are misunderstandings. There are friendships being broken. There's espionage. There's big political secrets. Of course, it is heartbreaking because it leaves off on such a devastating point. So if you are the kind of person who just can't wait to pick up the next book, the 3rd and final book in this trilogy does not come out until I think early next year. So if you are the kind of person who needs to know where the story is going immediately after you finish the previous book, and this might not be for you, I would still encourage you to pick up this series. Even if you don't like the cliffhanger, it's that good. I don't think you should wait. The next book that I read, which seemed to be really timely in that it seemed like everyone on the bookternet was talking about it at one time, is In the Woods by Tana French. And this is the first book in the Dublin Murder Squad series. This was a really fantastic book. I would consider it to be a thriller. It takes place, of course, in Ireland, and you follow 2 detectives, Rob Ryan and Cassie Maddox, as they're trying to solve a mystery of this girl who is found murdered in the woods. The thing that makes this a little bit more interesting is that one of the main detectives, Rob Ryan, has a history with the same woods in which this murdered girl is found. Something happened to him in these woods when he was a child that he has lost all memory of, but certainly some sort of crime had taken place because he is found running through the woods with blood in his shoes, and his 2 best friends were never seen again after that night. So you kind of have these intertwining stories of Cassie and Rob trying to solve the murder of this young girl, and Rob trying to delve into his own psyche to try to figure out what happened to him. It was twisty-turny. It was a lot of fun. There were some parts that I thought were a little bit slow, but overall it was a really solid effort. I've read on Goodreads reviews that all of Tana French's books just get better as they go on, and since this was her first book, and I know how much I like the second book, the third book I'm really looking forward to picking up. The next book I finished was a graphic novel called Chew. This story is about a detective who has a very strange ability, and that ability is when he eats something, he sees the entire history of that thing. For example, he stays away from meat products because he could see the entire process of what it took to get that meat in front of him, which is a little bit unsavory. But he starts using this ability to solve crimes, then there are supporting characters and a lot of different twists and turns and some political stuff in there as well. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. The second book I read on audio, which I happen to have a hard copy of, is The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I had planned to listen to the audiobook of Dead Souls for the road trip that I took, but I couldn't get my hands on it, so I decided to check out The Beautiful and Damned, the audiobook version from my library. And this is, of course, by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Great Gatsby is one of my favorite books, and so I've been trying to go through F. Scott Fitzgerald's other work to see how I like it. I've also read Tender is the Night, which I was not a big fan of. I liked this one better, but it could have used a lot of editing. I did a little bit of research into this book, and some of the reviews when this book first came out, kind of across the board, everyone thought that Fitzgerald was way too depressing. And I can see why. This book is dark. It's about a man named Anthony Patch and his eventual wife Gloria, and they are the most shallow, money-obsessed, self-centered, immature people that I've ever heard about in my entire life. They essentially spend their entire marriage waiting for the day that Anthony Patch's rich grandfather will die and leave them a whole bunch of money, at which point they will start their life. But in the meantime, of course, they're going to fight with one another and continue to be just generally horrible people. It does have some pretty gorgeous writing because it's Fitzgerald. I mean, come on. So if unlikable characters and the 20s and general darkness appeals to you, this is a good one. Overall, I enjoyed it, so I gave it 3 stars. A book that I reserved for my library that I got about 100 pages into and then just couldn't deal with anymore is The Poser by Jacob Rubin. This is about a master impersonator who can imitate pretty much anyone he comes across except one girl who eludes him, and it's really dull. I kept waiting for the story to take off. It does have some pretty interesting writing at points, but the characters are extremely hollow. Nothing really interesting was happening. It was just scene to scene to scene. There was really no fluidity to the story. I didn't enjoy it, gave it 1 star and gave up. And then I got one book via NetGalley that I have recently finished, and that's called Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed: 16 Writers on Their Decision Not to Have Kids. I found this really, really enjoyable. My husband and I are not planning to have children, so it was really interesting to read these people's perspectives and see what about their reasoning matched up with ours, if anything, about their decision not to have kids differed from our reasons. Overall, I gave it 5 stars. I would really recommend it. I'm planning on doing a more thorough review of it in conjunction with one of the books that I'm going to read this month, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm still working on 2 books that I meant to finish in March. Whoops. So hopefully I'll finish these really soon. This first one I only have about 50 pages left of, so I'm really confident I can finish it in a day or 2. That is It Was a Long Time Ago and It Never Happened Anyway by David Satter. And this talks about Russia and its communist past and the inability or reluctancy of the Russian people to confront some of the horrors of the Soviet past. It's pretty dark. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm having some trouble getting through it. It is very readable, but it's really hard to read about some of the things that the Russian past is filled with. Even knowing what I know about Russian history, I'm discovering new and increasingly gruesome things, but I am working through it. And the last book that I'm really confused as to why I haven't finished yet is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. When I was talking about this book in my March TBR, I said that this was YA. At the time I thought it was. It's actually not. It's just classified under general old fantasy according to the publisher. I'm liking this a lot. It talks about parallel Londons and magical things and a guy who can travel in between them and a aspiring lady pirate. And these are all things I enjoy, but for some reason it's just not, it doesn't have me yet. I'm about 100 pages in and I'm just waiting for everything to really take off. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm planning to read for April. Of course, I'm planning on reading the second volume of Chew. Because Sarah from Sarah Actually Reads spoke so highly of this one, I'm going to read Relish by Lucy Knisley, which is a graphic memoir about food. And being someone who loves cooking, I can't wait to dive into this one. One of the nonfiction books that I want to read is Time Warped: Unlocking the Mysteries of Time Perception. I got this as an ARC off of Goodreads a really long time ago, and I'm really embarrassed I haven't read it yet. The book I'm planning on doing a joint review of with Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed is What to Expect When No One's Expecting: America's Coming Demographic Disaster by Jonathan V. Last. And this talks about how people in the Western world, of course, in this book focusing on America, are having less and less children. So you can see why I want to talk about it with the other book. I'm also going to read The Golem The Gini by Helene Wecker. I don't know a huge amount about this one, and I kind of want to keep it that way. I just know that it's kind of magical and was recommended to me because I like the Night Circus, so I am so excited to start this. I'm also currently reading another NetGalley title called The Lost Boys Symphony by Mark Andrew Ferguson. This is about a college-aged guy whose girlfriend leaves him and transfers to another school, and he is abducted by future versions of himself that are trying to get him to steer his life in the right direction. It's pretty interesting thus far. Again, I'm not super captivated, but I'm willing to give it more time because I think the writing is really interesting. The book I'm listening to on audiobook right now that I have just started getting into is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. This is about a young girl in I think the 1890s who becomes enamored with a female stage performer and decides to go to London with her to try to take her career off. She ends up getting into show business herself. So this sounds really interesting. I love me some historical fiction, and I really like Sarah Waters' writing style. And if I have time for a second audiobook this month, I'm going to listen to The Romanov Sisters by Helen Rappaport. This book is about the 4 daughters of Nicholas II, who was the last Tsar of Russia. And their names are Marie, Tatiana, Olga, and Anastasia. I've always found the family of Nicholas II absolutely fascinating. Though I know a lot about the time period in which they lived, and I know a lot about, of course, their father, I know very little about their family life and the lives of the 4 girls. I know a little bit about their personalities. Most of what I know about them comes from Robert K. Massey's really fantastic biography of their parents called Nicholas and Alexandra, of course. But I've never read a book specifically about them, so I'm really looking forward to listening to that. So that was my March wrap-up and April TBR for 2015. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to drink some wine and contemplate shaving this side of my head as I do. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find me on both Twitter and Instagram at @BookOlive. My Goodreads profile is also down below, and of course, you can always feel free to leave a comment if you'd like to talk about something. Until next time, everybody, cheers.